Alole Mefelemek. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another segment here on Project Purpose. For those of you who are new, we cover topics that relate to mental health, mental wellness, and education on a week by week basis. And today's topic of discussion is education. And the conversation on education, I want to talk about visualization. And so, visualization is a practice that some people do quite frequently and other people do not do at all, but it is a practice that really does enable us to become visionary, and not only to become visionary if that's not something that you're aspiring to be, but it also helps us to meet those goals, those stretch goals. I think that there's a lot to be said about being able to visualize something and then being able to act on that visualization. And so for me, I am very goal oriented, and the way that I approach my goals is I first start with this visualization exercise. I start by visualizing the goal to try to capture the feeling. So it's not so much about all of the specific details, but creating an emotional tag. And with that emotional tag is the fuel that I need to drive me as I begin the journey towards that specific objective. But not only do I engage in the visualization exercise when it comes to the goals that I'm pushing toward, I also engage in visualization when I think about the path to get there. So I don't know if you've heard this saying, but like I'm a keen believer, and I think that all of us can recognize it for its truth, is that the future is uncertain, it's unknown, and the past, it does not exist anymore. It exists in our mind's eye. And so for those of us who can capture the past, we can kind of visualize past events, but we struggle to have an imagination about the here and now or visualize future events. I think that we have our first building block. And so what I want to talk about in today's discussion is how you actually go about visualizing, and then how you couple visualization with creative thinking, with critical thinking, to really enable you to not only plan for success, but strategically pivot and adapt and be agile in an unknown terrain to accomplish that success. And so that's what I want to come on here and talk about today. First, I want to talk about the practice of visualization itself. And so I think, as with everything, it is a muscle. So if you are not the kind of person, or if you are not someone who visualizes, like when you close your eyes, it's just dark, you don't have a mental map of anything, then the first thing that you need to do is just practice by being intentional. And so when I think about being intentional, it's the difference between seeing and looking. And so there was this one class that I had in my technical communications degree that really had a big influence on me. And there was this one book that we leveraged called The Practice of Looking. And so a lot of us engage with the world subconsciously. So we're subconsciously like processing cues and different elements in the environment that we're emotionally responding to without necessarily being aware of what it is. Whereas practices of looking is like, now you're being really intentional. And now if you want to visualize a space, I think start with any space. Start with the space that you're in now. And first, practice looking. Look at everything that is in your space right now. Look at the specific details of those things. Build a mental map, build words and adjectives to characterize the things in your space, and then hold the space that you're in right now within your gaze, and then close your eyes and try to keep the image. And so at first it's a really faint, foggy, fuzzy image, but if you keep practicing it, the mental image of the room around you becomes so much more clear. And so, as I said, like, this is a muscle that you can develop. And so for those of us who spent a lot of time reading as a child, like, this visualization activity is really an extrapolation from words. So from words, if you're a big visualizer, and I am someone who was a massive reader as a child, like, you couldn't keep me away from books, to the extent that if I was going to be punished for something, my parents didn't take away my TV rights. I was never a big TV watcher. They would take away my privileges of going to the library, because I would go to the library on a week by week basis to get like 10 books and return the 10 books that I had read during the week. And so what I would do is, like, whenever I would read, it wasn't like I was reading each word and like processing each word at once. I was reading it to the extent where it was a movie playing in my mind. Like, I can see the characters, I can feel the emotions, like I was transmuted into that experience. And I think that that was a muscle that I only developed because I read so much as a child. But I think it's something that we can also build just looking at the world around us, right? And I think that, like, when you start to be able to capture mentally the pictures and the frames and the things in your environment that you're interacting with on a day-to-day basis, then from there, being able to create pictures and create, I guess, emotions and experiences with your mind's eye becomes a lot more straightforward. So that's the first step that I think would be really important for you to hone in on. Now, the second step is figuring out what your goal and your dream is. And so for me, like, I am a huge goal planner, but a lot of my goals are influenced by the things that I've experienced during the year, the things that I've watched, like what's inspired me, like where do I want to put my energy. Like, I like my goals to be fluid and responsive to the world and the changes in the world around me, for sure. But how I gauge like what I'm actually going to pour my time, energy, and attention into is based on the emotional effect, right? So when I'm inspired by something, when something piques my curiosity, it's not emotional investment, not yet. And so when I first think about, well, what goals do I want to establish and do I really want to put my time into it, I visualize the goal first. And I think that this is a great exercise to do because you don't need to put your energy into something to halfway realize it's really not for you. If you spend enough time visualizing, like, not just the goal itself, but the path to get there, and there's always going to be a gap that you need to bridge between a desired reality and where you are right now. And if you think that that gap is just too tedious to cross, then maybe scratch that goal off for now. But if you find that when you are visualizing that goal, you're starting to create that feeling, that sensation, and capturing like what it would feel like to accomplish that goal, and then from there you are thinking about the path and like the things that you have to undergo or experience on that path in order to achieve that goal, and you're still having that emotional effect, like you still feel fairly convinced that this is something that's going to be a feel good, look good moment for you, then I say go for it. And so for me, like, that's how I establish a lot of my short, mid, and long-term goals, is like through this practice of visualization and through this practice of not just visualizing the end result, but also visualizing the journey, all the steps involved, and trying to be realistic as possible. And so for some of the goals where it's just a lot of ambiguity, a lot of uncertainty, and I think the next video that I want to do this week is on VUCA, is on navigating in a world that is volatile, that is uncertain, that is complex, and that is ambiguous, is that you create goals as more like experiments, right? So even when I started up with Project Purpose, it was really experimentation because I knew that a lot of people were successful in a lot of different niches, and I wanted to combine all of those niches together to create this global community. But even it being a global community came through different life events that made me think bigger about Project Purpose and her reach and the scope of what it was that I was hoping to accomplish here. So I think that it's so important that we think about ourselves and relate goals that we have and how we ourselves are going to grow through that process and what it is we need to do to invest in our growth in that process. And so when I think about the gap that I need to bridge, it's not just about the things that I need to do externally, it's also about the things that I need to develop internally. Like, do I need to be more patient? Do I need to cultivate specific skill sets? Do I need specific competencies? Do I need to find myself in a specific adjacent network, or do I need to hire out? Like, all of these questions you have to ask yourself honestly and figure out the answer as part of your planning so that you can like find yourself incrementally moving towards the goal ahead. And that's super important. And so last but not least, I want to talk about this effective experience. And so for me, like, I am trying to recreate an emotion that I feel will be close, if not more or less, exactly what it's going to feel like to accomplish the goal. And so I've done this exercise enough that I can generate the affect that comes with accomplishing a specific event. And if that affect doesn't, for me, measure to the challenges, the hardships, the difficulties that I will experience trying to attain that goal, then I have to ask myself some really hard questions about whether or not it's something that I want to do. And right now, like, I have my hands in so many different buckets. I'm just super conservative about where I put my time and energy. So the affect needs to be there. There needs to be an emotional attachment to where I put my energy. It is a huge barometer of evaluation of mine. And I know some people don't like the whole emotional evaluation. They think that emotions are just not as valid or just not as credible. But I think that we're whole humans. Like, we need to bring our whole selves to every decision. And I think that even if sometimes like the goal makes sense financially or it makes sense in objective, quantitative, qualitative terms, if it doesn't feel like something that you want to put your heart into, then at some point, like, you might have all of what people would externally sort of evaluate to be success, but you yourself feel completely empty. So I think that, like, in order to find fulfillment and meaning and purpose on the journey, there needs to be that emotional effect. There needs to be like that emotional attachment there. And I'm just so big on that because for me, like, you can either do the hard things that every goal is going to require you to do. I don't think that there's any significant or, I guess, noteworthy goal that anyone can accomplish that doesn't involve hardship, sacrifice, that doesn't involve some degree of like personal compromise, not like by way of integrity, but like things that you have to like let go of in order to make those goals a reality. And why do any of those things if you don't have that emotional attachment? Like, I would never put myself through the process to accomplish something that wasn't something that I was emotionally attached to. And so I think external validation is not important enough for me to like put my emotional energy into a goal I think trying to like look good in front of others or like align to like social norms, those at some point, like when you achieve that goal and still feel empty about it, like it's not going, you're going to realize like those were not the right barometers of evaluation as to whether or not this was something that required your emotional energy. And then your energy then becomes a sunk cost. And so I find myself often thinking about like the sunk cost of my investment. And a lot of it is now energy, it's my emotion. A lot of what I'm utilizing when I'm pushing towards things that matter most to me are skills I've already gained, right? There's skills and competencies I've already gained. There's been a bit of a plateauing by way of the amount of skills that I've developed, even with Project Purpose. Like at the beginning, it was like this steep rise. I was learning how to edit, I was learning how to create content, I was learning how to manage my website, like I was learning about SEO. Like there's so many things that I had to have like a decent grasp on just to make some traction. And now it's just like perfecting and trying to find the best way to put those skills together. But I have an understanding of those specific things. But then it's just really important that like if it does come with a lot of upfront emotional, mental, cerebral investment, then make sure that it is in alignment with your sense of purpose, your sense of meaning, and your sense of fulfillment. So I'll talk a little bit more about VUCA, about trying to accomplish our goals in an unknown world, dealing with threats, with things that happen in our environment that are completely beyond our control, but not letting that deter us. And I think that with that conversation, I want to just talk a little bit about this like VUCA reality and how life is less about the skills we gain to follow a specific career path, the skills we gain to be the kind of person that anyone would hire out of any sort of market or domain, because we have the capacity to deal with volatility by being a visionary. We can deal with uncertainty by bringing understanding. We can deal with complexity by bringing clarity. We can deal with ambiguity by being agile, bringing that agility factor. And again, like entrepreneurship for me, completely new. It's not like I had people in my family that were trying to do the things that I'm trying to do that I could leverage mentorship from. And with the things that I experienced in my life, I ended up trying it out on my own completely. So planning in the blind, pivoting in the blind, seeing what works best. Like experimental planning, experimental strategy has been the only thing that I've leveraged that gets me to this point. And I've learned a lot from that. But again, like it makes things very tedious sometimes. And so the love of what it is that I'm pursuing is what keeps me pursuing it. In any case, that was a topic for today, some food for thought for you. Now, if I have piqued your interest, and I do suggest that you do check out our website. We offer adult programs, so programs that help you focus on cultivating that self-mastery by focusing on development as a module. We have clarity, we have growth, and then we also have acuity. So I think that those are really great modules to start to build the building blocks to create alignment in your life, so that you're only ever putting your energy in places where you also derive meaning and fulfillment in those places as well. And then also we do provide parent-child workshops. So workshops focus on cultivating that leadership competency in each child. And so these workshops are built with the premise that leadership quotient is built on 4 core competencies, and that's cultivating autonomy, self-efficacy, compassion, and self-concept. So something for everyone in your family. And if you're still here, like definitely follow us if you want to check out our next new videos. Again, we have conversations week by week on mental health, mental wellness, and education. Check out our website. We have great content. We have blogs. We have really something that anyone can leverage if they're really focusing and trying to find that inner clarity. So thank you again. Follow us across all of our social media platforms, and I look forward to chatting with all of you very soon. We'll talk to you later.